If you're a Canadian employer struggling to hire, a French-speaking global talent strategy could be your best move. Hiring French speakers is one of the fastest, easiest ways to bring the talent you need to Canada, and it doesn't require an LMIA. And the place of employment doesn't even need to be French. And the best part of all is you can do it without an LMIA. And if you know, you know. Despite higher unemployment rates across Canada, certain sectors and industries are still facing pervasive labor shortages. There simply isn't the skill or the available labor to fill shortages. For example, construction, tourism and hospitality, food and beverage services. There are businesses in all of these sectors and more that need to fill labor gaps to be able to stay in operation. Hiring global talent has become more challenging. Temporary resident targets have been reduced, LMIA caps are tighter, refusal to process restrictions are greater, processing scrutiny is increasing, and PR pathways are less predictable. But leveraging global talent to fill gaps in your labor force is still possible. And I'm going to show you how to use the Francophone Mobility Program and Canada's commitment to growing Francophone populations outside Quebec to fill these shortages long term. Canada has a mandate to increase Francophone immigration outside Quebec. That's resulted in 3 key immigration policies that benefit employers hiring. First, it's responsible for an LMI exempt work permit for French speakers destined for employment outside of Quebec. Second, it's resulted in Francophone community-based PR programs. Third, it's resulted in its very own dedicated PR selection round in the Express Entry system, which is Canada's primary mechanism for selecting skilled workers for permanent immigration in Canada. When your hiring strategies align with immigration policy, everything moves faster. So targeting these 3 opportunities is going to make your global talent strategy a success. You can hire French-speaking workers, whether they're outside Canada or already inside Canada, under the Francophone Mobility Program. Again, this is an LMI exempt work permit program, meaning you don't have to go through the whole process of advertising the position and applying for a labor market impact assessment. Instead, the candidate you're hiring has to demonstrate their French language skills by completing an official test and scoring at least level 5 on the speaking and listening components. The location of employment has to be outside Quebec, and the worker has to be able to prove they're qualified and capable of performing the job you're offering. The wage offered has to be consistent with industry norms within your company, and on par with market rate as advertised on JobBank, although it's not as strict a requirement as the LMIA process itself, giving employers a little bit more flexibility. When you're ready, submit the job offer to IRCC through the employer portal using LMIA exemption code C16. This is for the Francophone Mobility. Pay the $230 employer compliance fee and give a copy of that receipt to your new employee, along with the offer of employment number, which starts with an A. They need this information to submit an application for a work permit. The work permit will be specific to your business in the occupation that you offered them, and the duration of the work permit will match the length of the job offer, and typically I recommend a 3-year job offer or less. Depending on the nationality of the person you're hiring, they may be able to fly directly to Canada and apply for their work permit at the airport, or they may be required to submit the application online to IRCC prior to coming to Canada. And once that application is approved, they'll be able to get on a flight to come to Canada. These work permits are renewable. There's no limit on the number of times a person can renew a Francophone mobility permit, although a caveat to that is IRCC is always evaluating whether or not someone is likely to leave Canada when they are applying for a work permit. So over time, it may become trickier, but in the shorter term, this is a permit that is flexible and relatively fast to obtain initially, and it's renewable. Just a few more key clarifications around the Francophone Mobility Work Permit. The job does not need to be conducted in French. The place of work does not need to be bilingual, and the employee doesn't need to be a native French speaker. And a final note on employer compliance, the Francophone Mobility Permit falls under the purview of the International Mobility Program, and employers are expected and required to abide by the employer compliance requirements of this program. So make sure you're up to date and aware of what those requirements are. For example, keeping records of the individual's employment for 6 years minimum so that you can ensure you remain compliant. After the initial recruitment and hiring using the Francophone Mobility Work Permit, you and your employee can shift to a longer-term retention strategy. Often, this will be through the Express Entry system, which, as I mentioned before, this is the system that manages the primary economic immigration programs in Canada. To be eligible to apply for permanent residence in the Express Entry system, your employee has to meet the minimum eligibility criteria of one of the 3 programs managed in this system. Those programs are the Canadian Experience Class, the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and the Federal Skilled Trades Program. These programs all require skilled work, and that's dictated by Canada's National Occupational Classification System. It's essential that you identify the skill level of the job prior to hiring the individual, because that will dictate the long-term retention strategies that are available to you and your employee. The Francophone Mobility Program allows you to hire a worker in any skill level. Aligning the skill of the occupation with a permanent residency program will give you the ultimate value out of this strategy. So occupations that are high skilled, meaning they fall into what's called tier 0 through 3 of the National Occupational Classification System, will align with an Express Entry permanent residence program. And once the employee has a year of work for you in a skilled job, they'll be able to progress with an application for permanent residence through the Express Entry system. And I have an entire mini series on the Canadian Experience class, which you can check out as well. If you're hiring an employee in an entry-level or semi-skilled occupation, which are tier 4 and 5 occupations, then consider provincial nominee programs, which typically require support of an employer via a job offer, not an LMIA job offer in all cases, but a job offer for full-time and often indeterminate employment. As an employer, you can get the most value out of hiring global talent through the Francophone Mobility Program when you align the job offer and the employment with either a skilled occupation that's eligible in the Express Entry system for permanent residence, so that after your employee initially arrives and gains skilled work experience in Canada, they can proceed with an application for permanent residence, which will allow them to remain in Canada permanently and continue working for you as long as that relationship it works out. Alternatively, if you're hiring in a semi-skilled or entry-level position, then try and align the employee's work with a provincial nominee program. And I also have an episode on my channel that helps you sift through all the provincial nominee programs to pick one that's suitable for, in this case, your employee's situation. And you can also look at the Francophone Community Immigration Pilots. It's very limited in its scope, in so much as there are only a few communities that are currently part of the program. But if that happens to be a community in which your business operates, then that could be an option too. So just to recap, you can recruit and make an initial hire using the Francophone Mobility Program. You can hire in any occupation of any skill level. Where you're going to get the most ROI on this strategy is by aligning that hire, that occupation, and the location of work with a permanent residency program that allows your employee to move from work permit to permanent resident after they've arrived. And French speakers can take advantage of the category-based French draws in Express Entry, provincial nominee programs, and Francophone community pilot programs. A couple mistakes to avoid when you are implementing this strategy is waiting until the work permit is expiring before thinking about your employees' permanent residence options, and planning immigration reactively instead of as a workforce strategy. When you're proactive and strategic, you can work your way backwards and set yourself up for maximum success from the outset. So if you're hiring internationally, click the link in the pinned comments to access Navio HQ. We've built free employer tools that map this out clearly so you can decide whether to execute internally or bring in support. And bonus, when you sign up for Navio HQ, which by the way is your hub for all things Canadian immigration and it's absolutely free, you'll get an email with a booking link for a free 30-minute employer strategy session. So click the link below, sign up, and let's get your global hiring strategy in place.